Well, welcome to the show, Aggie. We're so excited you're here. You've been someone we've wanted on the podcast for so long. And before we go into all your learnings and lessons, I'd actually love to start with your journey. When did health become top of mind for you?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I've been girl crushing on both of you for the longest time. And I
Likewise.
remember when my friend Masha mentioned about how long have you had your company?
Been almost 3 years now.
Okay, yeah, so that just seems right because I got into like cycle syncing about 2 years ago. But before that, I remember Masha said that like, oh, I had friends and they do, they mix different things that you have to support your cycle. And I was like, that's super witchy and weird, but
Yeah.
whatever. And but they seem great. And then fast forward to now, I was like, why did I not start earlier? Isn't it funny how like you have to grow up to certain things? But you guys were the OGs and the pioneers, and now you see cycle syncing all over Instagram. And you must be probably thinking, I'm like, I've been telling you this, guys, for the longest time, no?
I feel like we've learned from people like Alyssa Vitti and some of these other people who have been doing it even longer than us. So I'm sure there's like, this is just all ancient wisdom and it's kind of coming back full circle. So we're just happy to see it.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I think it's just like when I first got into it, saw Alyssa Vitti's, like saw the research, and also saw like you said, it's the ancient wisdom. It's like I had such a beautiful download when I did ayahuasca like probably a year and a half ago, and she's like, "Oh, you're so cute. You think you're biohacking? We've known this for thousands of years, but go ahead." And it's that whole idea that we need like science to validate things, but there was a rite of passage, and then we would pass on to this information from our ancestors to people forward. And so I think that's super special that what I have been missing in the biohacking space is that feminine energy to like say, okay, this is the ancient wisdom and this is the science and this is my body. So between the three, what do I do? Instead of following just the science, which is very much like, I haven't seen the study, like that's what I know. That's a bit of a wounded masculine when someone just wants to see a study and like immediately implement. And I'm like, what if you're different? What if you grew up in a different place, genetic makeup? Who was the study conducted on, men or women, menstruating women or menopausal women? So all of these things have like such an impact. So it's like above all of that, there is the mindset, there is the ancient wisdom that we already they understood the mind body connection. And then there's your body, and what you're going through every single day. So that definitely didn't answer your question.
No, but I love that. I love that because Kay and I interview, and similar to you, so many experts, and we're in this space that sometimes it can feel overwhelming. And I think one thing I try to always remind myself is what works for me. You can educate and learn about everything, try different stuff, but going back to what you said of honoring your body, what works for you. So I love that because I sometimes need that reminder as well.
I think what's really important is making space for women, not only between us, but also by incredible men that understand that we need both. We need both the feminine and the masculine energy for both to thrive, not because, oh, it's politically correct to include women now in my podcast because I'm a male and I just interviewed 400 other males. It's because without that female perspective and the kindness and the compassion, there is lack, there's no balance. And so understanding that and just embracing that has been like my journey as well, because I know within myself I'm not very balanced because my entire life I have taken advice from men like Tony Robbins. I'm like, oh, Tony's amazing and I'm going to be Tony Robbins in my life. And same with Dave Asprey, and they're all very discipline rigid, and I don't believe women thrive through discipline. We're already so hard on ourselves that women thrive through acceptance and pleasure. When we feel seen, heard, and safe, we will change and we will get to our fitness goals and regulate our hormones. It's not going to be another one of those cold plunges and 20-hour fast. And I look at men, I'm like, I want to be those things and I want to be like Tony Robbins. And then I'm like, okay, I have ovaries, so I'll do it differently. I still can get to the same spot, but from a different place and not from a place of burnout.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. I remember in 2017, 2018 was like the height of biohacking, and there were no female voices, at least that I knew of. And so it was like Dave Asprey and all these guys that you're talking about who are amazing. I was like, I want to be like them. I want to do all the things they're doing. I want to like set up my
Even
morning.
better. Because we're overachievers as women, so we're gonna do like
yeah, I was like, I'm going to eat keto and I'm going to have my morning routine. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then I came out of all of that just like completely going the other way. Like, where's my soft girl life? Where's my flowy dress? Where's like my
Love that
downtime?
you're wearing, like,
I,
yes.
yeah, I'm also like 16 weeks pregnant, so this is the only thing that's working for me right now. But I definitely
No,
felt like thank
congratulations.
you, thank you. It's the first time I've actually said it on the podcast, so that's kind of fun. I feel like that the female energy was missing from that space, and I think a lot of us women, I can definitely relate to that. We're just like, we want to be a part of this exciting thing, but there was nobody speaking for us. So you're totally speaking our language right now, and I'm so
We
glad
all
that
are. And I'm here to like make space of like I know that we have a lot of like sister ones, and like there is this competition sometimes with women back in the day, that because there was one space at the table for us, but there's one woman, it's like we feel like we need to compete. But I feel like the new generation of women, it's like a combo of Gen Z and millennia women that are like, no, competition's really like draining me and it's eating at my energy, and I would rather put that energy into creating something or co-creating a community. So I really don't want to buy into that. I would rather collaborate and connect with those people because it just feels so much better. And like from that place we can run a business. And I think it's not even about how much money you make, is how you make the money and how that process is making you feel.
I love that. I think a lot about that, Aggie. So I'm glad you brought up. And one thing you mentioned when we started the interview, you were talking about a friend, Masha, who was talking about, seed cycling, what we were doing. And similar, I was in your position where when you first heard just about cycle syncing and seed cycling, you're like, what the heck is that woo woo? I didn't do it for years. I didn't understand the hormonal rhythm. So what was a turning point for you to go from, oh, this is woo woo, I don't understand my hormones, to, oh, let me learn a bit more about this and dive deep into it like you have today?
Great question. So I got into biohacking, and then about a few years after, I felt like a complete imposter. Even though Dave Asprey is not a doctor or a nutritionist or whatever, I was like, I would never be able to share it with my audience because I need all that paperwork, which is very feminine. I need to have a PhD before I even open my mouth on anything. And then we feel like we need to, instead of just saying, hey, this is my experience, and I don't know everything, but you should talk to your doctor, and this has been my experience. Anyways, long story short, I had a friend who was like, he was a fitness trainer, and he's like, we should do a challenge for your audience. But, I teach fasting and workouts, and we can do it together. I'm like, great, because I'm not an expert, and let's do it together. And we had about 20,000 people sign up to this like free email challenge. And we got to the point of, and I had this moment of like, he's a man, he's teaching all the women. I had this like, huh, how many times I've taken advice from men? Almost every time. Male trainers made this. I'm like, something like didn't sit well. And then over the time, I'm like, he's like, oh, so I'm doing a 20, I have these incredible results, and I just limit my fasting. And I was just like, I've done this. And sometimes I just like overeat right after, I have the refeeding syndrome and I don't eat it. And I'm like, I'm going to eat so much more that day. And so I asked him, like, is it different with women? He's like, yeah, when I work with women, it is a little different, but not that much. And that question kind of like stuck with me. And I'm like, let me see. And so as I got into the research, like, wow, there was such a big difference. And I think the end of our relationship was that he's just like, honestly, let's not go into detail because it's pretty much the same. And I was like, oh no, like I need to go on a journey and I'm going to discover it myself. And then I was just like, oh, well, I need to share it with women. But I was like, but I can't share it because I'm not a I'm not a gynecologist. And then I realized, oh, I can just share it from a place of like, hey, this is what the science says, And so I took the angle of like, here are the studies, and I'm just going to make them super fun for you to into, bite-sized information presented. So every time I would do these challenges or courses, I was like, here's what we learned. I had a medical team, and I was like, here's the research behind it, but see how it feels in your body. And I think because I'm not an expert, that gave women permission to stop listening, following to me. Because I was just like, I wasn't saying this is the way. I was just sharing like, here's the science, but also, you know, this is your own body and this is your temple and you know best. And I think that's what kind of like helped me grow, because women just didn't want to be in this. Yeah, they wanted to hear another woman. We all do in a way.
you mentioned, I think you were saying kind of like the fasting element. What were some of the other things that you were doing before that you thought like, oh, this is super good for my body, but it was actually like not?
Oh, great. Well, a strong like keto diet, I think I have diabetes both on my mom and my dad's side. So I was vegan. I never had sugar. I kind of always avoided carbs. I was not really heavy on carbs, but even up until this point with biohacking, like my sugar is a little higher than normal because it's just my genetics. So I always kind of like avoided carbohydrates because I know that this is I have my genetic predisposition. Now I incorporate them back depending on where I am in my cycle, and I eat them in the right order. So I'm less scared of carbs. I definitely match my workouts to my cycle, and something called acceptance, grace, and compassion towards myself that I yet do not possess, but I am practicing every day like a muscle, especially right before my period. And just being a little bit like kinder to myself and being like, you're human, right? Like, this is what happens when all of these hormones are happening. So you're good. And so that's been really helpful.
It's so interesting. You posted recently a little bit more about your journey. You were a very well known travel blogger, influencer, and you've opened up and shared pretty incredible photos of just like the behind the scenes of the health that and the issues that you were dealing with, right? Because on paper and on Instagram, everything was perfect, but you were secretly suffering, right? You mentioned, you were tired, depressed, you had an unhealthy relationship with food, acne. I mean, I've been there for sure as well. So, what were the steps? So, you mentioned kind of some of the shifts that you've made right now with working out, but what were maybe some of those early shifts that you did when you realized something's going on with my body, and this can't be right?
Yeah. Step one, denial.
Yeah,
Absolute
totally.
denial. Like powering through. It's probably temporary and probably should be eating even less. And I'm not trying hard enough, and I'm weak and I should be doing more. I'm going to do more, even less calories, even more workouts, even more like effort. And I think that's the difference between fitness and biohacking. Biohacking is an effort. It doesn't come from a place of effort, it comes from a place of sinking and like dancing with, which I think it's like, again, beautiful feminine way of like we don't need to power through. There's a hard way to do things and there's the easy thing to do things. And growing up Polish, everything's meant to be hard. Eastern European, otherwise you're lazy. So there a lot of culturally, I felt like if I'm not suffering, then I'm definitely not doing something right. If something is easy, can't be good. All of these limiting beliefs that I adopted about my body, about my work, and about my business. And I think it really is relatable to women. We feel like we're not working when we're not millionaires, we think we're not working hard enough. But I know a lot of millionaires that don't necessarily work hard enough. They just pause and just look like what brings the most ROI. And there's an ROI on your health as well. Return on investment, like how much time I'm putting into it, what's going to bring the biggest results for my health. And I think that's again, that was the difference. That was the first step. So first was the denial. Then second, realizing, starting to questioning, okay, what about vegan diet? What about there's 1% of me that maybe is open to new ideas. And I think there's this beautiful quote that an educating mind can entertain an idea without accepting it. And I think it has been really, really helpful in my journey to like, I can listen to someone who says, X, Y, and Z is good for you, and like not get offended or get super passionate. I'm just like, okay, that's your idea. I can see your point. When people say like, I hate you, you suck. And I'm like, I can see your point, I don't do everything well. And I see how you wouldn't resonate and like take things out of context. I'm like, I agree, like things are imperfect. And so I started entertaining the idea that perhaps meat might be good for me, potentially. And so again, I also understand that some people thrive on a vegan diet and they feel absolutely incredible. For me, like just wasn't the case. The moment I had a piece of meat, I felt like someone plugged me back to power on the supercharge, after 8 years of not eating any meat. And I was like, wow, I was choosing this. And now I have deep reverence for animals, for protein, and yet I understand I'm part of the food chain, so I will be food for somebody else soon. And I don't know if those bags gonna have a lot of reverence for me, eating me in a few years, but I'm okay with that. This is part of life, right? And so being okay with my image as a vegan, I was very openly vegan and just like feeling like, oh my God, like maybe I'm going to disappoint people and whatnot. And then finally taking extreme ownership of my life and my health. So stop saying, oh, because this person said this, so I'm doing that. But like, it doesn't matter what people say. It's no one is responsible for your health. No government, no medical system, no doctor, no podcast, no biohacker. You need, like, this is it. This is the most valuable asset. Health is wealth. That's your true currency. So you can, like how much you're willing to invest in that.
Yeah, I can 100% relate. I was vegetarian for 25 years, so the first 25 years of my life. And then for 5 of those years, I was vegan. And I was one of those really annoying type of ones that was like, this is the way, and really preaching my philosophy. And I was doing it for the ethical purposes, primarily in the way that I grew up. And then I remember kind of switching to more of a paleo style and then being like, this is the way. And now I'm at a point where I'm like, anybody who says this is the way is just like, don't listen to them, because I agree. There are people who feel amazing eating a vegan diet. There are people feel amazing eating more meat. And the wars that people get into online, that is just something I want to stay away from. And something you said earlier really reminded me, our body is like the best doctor in the room, and it will tell us what's working for us and not working for us. Can you talk to us a little bit about like what were some of your symptoms of PMS and things that you were going through near your menstrual cycle prior to where you are now?
Super. I think I was so disconnected with my cycle that I even never put together that PMS and then having a period. I know it sounds really crazy, but I would just have these like random fights with my fiance or, then boyfriend. And I would just, oh, he sucks, and then I would get my period and I never really connected that this is the PMS. I just saw the mood swings, just the sweets. It's so funny that a lot of people don't even know they're PMSing because they can't put together the two, which is like, I think stage one of complete unawareness of your cycle. Then stage two was like, oh, I'm noticing the hormonal imbalances and now I see it's connected to my period, but I couldn't figure out how to make it. I thought it was normal. All I see is like, like nothing annoys me more. When I see a fitness expert, she's like, girl, this is the time of the month, have a bag of chips. I'm like, no, that's not the time of the month to not support your body. This time to like actually have nature-based carbs and actually put some energy into your body. Yes, needs carbs, but it's not time to give them processed food that's going to make you crave even more, make you malnourished. So yeah, I get really passionate about that because I feel like a little bit of education would go a long way. And if this was taught in schools, even if you just say like instead of 4 phases, that just say there are two, until ovulation and after ovulation, which is like cyclically, it's like doesn't even go into 40s. It's like it doesn't really matter that much. It's just like before ovulation and then after. I've never heard that growing up.
I mean, we never heard that either. And I even remember every single month being like, I feel like I'm going crazy. Everything sucks. My relationships, everything is horrible. And then 2 days later, getting my period and being like, oh, that's what was happening. And even just the awareness around that, like you were saying, we're not taught about that. At least here in America, we really didn't learn anything about our menstrual
Yeah, and
cycle.
same in Europe. And I think I always like to think it's like in the book I say, it's like like the superhero movie. Like they brainwash him that his superpower is actually he's like curse. He's like all miserable. And I'm like, that's actually a superpower. And I feel like it's a little bit like that with women. We live in patriarchy. It's like, oh, you have your period, you need to hide, you're in the bathroom. If you're going to the bathroom in a public place in a restaurant, like hide your tampon in your sleeve. Oh, gross, embarrassing. Da da da. I'm like, no, like it's just like you're shedding, like how, like what else are you shedding? It's like just makes me super sad that because it's a patriarchy, they create those stories about what period is, and it's considered dirty by some religions or this and that. And I'm like, it's interesting. I feel like if we were in a female centric society, of how different we would think about all of this.
100%. Even somebody I was talking to earlier about breastfeeding and how it's still, in a lot of cases, really taboo to breastfeed in public. And I was like, that's so sad because you're literally feeding your child. Like, it's taboo to feed your child in public. There's so many things that women do around our bodies that there's still a lot of shame around it. And I'm still working through some of that stuff. Like, I'm not immune to it. I think it's like years of all that brainwashing, but I agree, it would be beautiful to see what a women centric society would be set up as.
Yeah, and we would like celebrate our periods and know like, have you read the book Pussy a Reclamation by Mama Gina?
No, I know Mama Gina, but I haven't read that
Yeah,
one.
her book is great, and I think she even let me like heal a lot of shame even with the word pussy, and she goes into detail of how we shouldn't use any other word because the fact that it's even a swear word or inappropriate is also part of the brainwash, as a part of the rebellion. You use that word freely because it's just like it's powerful, so I highly recommend it to all of your listeners as well.
Yes, we'll have to put it in the show notes.
Yeah, and I also, similar to you, was suffering for so long, and I didn't realize that it could be because of hormonal imbalances, and that's what kind of got me into this world, and why we started beeya and everything. I'm like, we need to be educated about all this. So I'm curious, looking back at that time when you realized I might be having some hormonal imbalances, what were some of the shifts that you noticed made a big difference when it came for you really eating and living in alignment with your cycle?
And number one would definitely upping my protein intake, eating to support my glucose. So eating in the right order, starting with fiber, vegetables, then having enough protein and fats. And then like whenever I have space, I have carbs. But I used to start my meal with carbs and get a big glucose spike and nibble on food and had a sweet breakfast. So just understanding how important glucose is was like a number one. Understanding that like the more muscle I have, the more metabolically active they are, so I can get away with more naughty food and I also don't crave it. So like not being afraid to lift weights was a big one. It took a lot of unwinding because I was like, oh no, lifting weights, I'm gonna look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But I was like, okay, I'll do that. So like I signed up to Gold's Gym. I'm like, I'm gonna lift weights. Sure enough, Arnold is right there every morning at 7:30. And I'm like, I don't want to look like him. And then I saw what he's doing. I'm like, oh yeah, no, I will never look like him. Never mind. So so for all these women, like I lift really heavy and you can't even see. Yeah, I still have small arms. It's not that easy to build. You have to be eating a lot, like 4,000 calories a day and lift really, really heavy for you to look like a man. So just realizing that you're good, you're safe, you can lift heavy and you're not going to look like a Terminator. And so that would be my biggest advice. And also like I really believed in calorie restriction. And so understanding that I can eat until I'm full has been really helpful as well, because that just been never, all I heard is like calorie restriction, this and that. And I'm like, oh no, but like fat is good for me and I need fat and I need fat for my hormones and I need calories for my hormones. And again, it was like very much against everything I thought I knew about nutrition, and there's still advice out there. Some people do say, avoid fat or saturated fat, and that just hasn't been working for me. Like I have the most incredible skin. I have like a CC cream and I'm glowing, it's like a without makeup just because I eat saturated fat, and I was avoiding fat and my skin was all gaunted at 31, more so than, I look at now at almost 37. So
A lot of what you talk about online is just kind of your personal body transformation. And I'm sure there's tons of women hitting you up every day, like, what do I do? How do I do this? How do I look like Aggie? And you talk about how you would never tell women to eat less. And I think still women think, if I want to look like that, I need to eat less calories. I need to be in calorie deprivation. And I want you to talk a little bit more about that. Like, what did it look like before? How are you eating now? How has that changed? Can you share any specifics around like the amount of food that you eat? Because I just want to dispel this idea that we need to be depriving ourselves to have the body that we want.
100%. And that's really hard, right? Because I noticed that the more I eat, the more energy I have to work out. And then like it's better to move more and eat more, because the moment you restrict, there's nowhere to go. You still need some calories to like process basic human functions. And then if you keep on restricting, your body's going to keep adjusting the metabolic rate. So there's nowhere to go after that, so that you really, really like set up yourself for a yo-yo effect right away if the moment you restrict. I personally, I'm like, you have two options. Sure, maybe you can lose weight by calorie restriction, but that just sounds painful to me. Like you don't have to be in calorie deficit um, and have incredible results. So like when I show my photos of my transformation, I always try to make sure to use the photo within a year or when I was like chubbier and how quickly I lost weight. I'm not as fit anymore just because I was just like, wow, I was like really, just muscle and skin. And now that I'm like focusing on my fertility, I want to make sure that I, like different goals, right? I showed to myself like, oh, biohacking can get me a super smoking body. I still have it, but like I want to put on a little bit more weight, like intentionally, just so I can get ready for a pregnancy hopefully soon. And I that's just like different goals, right? Like I don't want to have a six pack right now, but when it comes to more calories, upping my protein, like, it almost feels like it's hard to overeat on the real food. That's the truth. If you say like I can have all the vegetables and I can all have the meat, I don't really fry my meat. We try to either air fry it or steam it and put a lot of olive oil or ghee. So when you eat like that, I find it really, really hard to like I eat until I'm actually full and I don't feel like binge eating. But when I was eating a lot of processed foods, that's really easy to eat beyond what you can, feel satiated because it doesn't really fill you. So I think as long as you stick to whole foods, I think you can really eat as much as if you eat in the right order, just fill yourself up with fiber, then, a good quality protein and fat, and then have good nature carbs. I don't feel like I never count my calories. I just know roughly because I was just like, I wonder how many calories I actually eat. I'm like, wow, that I'm like at 2,500 easily. And I don't really count. I never really like measure anything. I just eat until I'm kind of full, and it's very liberating. And I just trust that my body knows when she's hungry.
Yeah, I love that. It's so funny. It just reminds me of, a few years ago, I had one of my friends living with me and she said to me, she's like, Yasmin, I didn't realize like how much you snacked. And we were working from home and I was like, that's so interesting. I was just not eating full meals to your point. I was not having that protein and that fat. So I would just eat sporadically and then I would snack. And now, similar to you, when you started eating meat, when I started having like what you said, protein, fat, fiber, and actual breakfast, because I used to skip that for many years, probably most of my life, I would just have coffee. I felt like my brain completely turned on. And now I have a very similar, I guess, relationship with food like you. I try to have 3 meals a day. I'm not snacking. I feel so full when I'm eating, but it really just goes down to, at least works for me, just eating whole foods, eating 3 meals a day. Like that's my regimen every day. And I feel significantly better with energy and just how I feel. And my face too. And I had horrible acne. Like I should probably do some before and after pictures as well. But I've noticed shifts there. It's pretty amazing what just focusing on what you're eating, like you're saying, can make such a world of a difference.
100%. And I think to your point, I just wish like I learned that 20 years ago, and like not being afraid of real food. And I think there was a part of me that was really scared about eating real food and full meals. So snacking felt like more feminine and, I'm just like not really eating, but I would be at the fridge or like I have crackers and bars and dried fruit and real fruit and yogurt and like oh my god, like it would just never ending. I would just be like and little nuts. I remember like even during pandemic I was just eating I think 9 times a day because you just opened the fridge, but my body was hungry, it was looking for protein. But I didn't understand. I thought I was just like going for what looks Instagrammy and colorful. Oh, I can have a green toast with like blue smoothie. And now I'm like, I can get my vegetables in a different form, but I was like eating way too much fruit and sugar first thing in the morning.
I'm curious, what role did stress and any mental health stuff that was coming up, what role did that play in your hormonal health journey?
Oh, that's a great question. I love that Dr. I do know Dr. Amen, right? And so he's just very much like, he's like, I can look at someone's brain and kind of tell them how they're doing. I thought it was really special that just like this research in general, like I never put together that my anxiety is linked to what I eat. I just thought it was linked to a stressful life. And I was like, I have a lot going on, I have a million followers, it's normal to be stressed. And I'm like, now I have 10 times more going on and I'm not as stressed. And part of it is mindset, but part of it is biology. So like I first started as a coach, and I was like, I'm gonna be a mindset coach and help women and Tony Robbins them, da 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 da. And then I realized if your biology is out of balance, there's no way you can focus and feel motivated. You're going to be using all of that energy to motivate yourself. But if you feel good in your body, if your hormones are balanced, you just create from such a beautiful place, not from a place of pushing yourself, but from a place of overflowing your cup. And for me, taking care of your hormones is literally filling your own cup first and understanding what's going on here, making sure it's okay so I can then come into the world bring my legacy into this world, not from a place of pushing and discipline, but from a place of overflowing giving. And that was like a big mindset shift for me as well. But when I think back in 2019, what I thought was a healthy vegan diet, I would like have a cocktail here and there. I would remember sometimes I would like sit in the shower and get such a like panic attack that it was just like, it was so scary. It happened a couple of times and I was just like, oh my God, I don't feel safe in my body. But it's amazing how much body's trying to beg you for attention. So panic attacks are the scariest thing on the planet. I remember going to a hospital in New York because I was living in New York at the time and just feeling like I'm having a heart attack. I can't breathe. All of the things I thought I was like, it felt like dying, and then they come and it's just like, no, you're good. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm good? Like, I thought it was just like so overwhelming. So yeah, I feel like there is a big connection between mental health and biology for sure, which I think needs to be spoken about more. It's just really feels like, oh, you have a problem, let's talk about it.
Yeah, especially the anxiety piece. I've dealt with that in the past for sure. And for me, it was like plummeting blood sugar. Just like my blood sugar was like getting so low. Under eating, and I didn't put that two and two together. Like, oh, maybe when your heart starts racing and you feel like you're panicking, that you probably didn't eat something or you didn't eat a balanced meal. And I love that this conversation is happening more now, because how many people are struggling with things like anxiety, panic attacks, depression, and not always, but there's often that mind body connection. There's something happening in the body, some sort of inflammation or some sort of imbalance that's leading to that. So I appreciate you speaking about that for sure.
No, and I think it's like it's glad that we have this conversation. I love that this is just that the nuances, this it's very subtle when you just like don't look at someone as just another, just look at them as a human. I'm like, oh well, everyone's a little different, and how it's all interconnected and how it works both ways, and sometimes your mindset can make you sick because you're in victim mentality, so you might have an absolutely super healthy body and biohack till kingdoms come. But if you feel sorry for yourself and you feel like everyone's against you, you're probably going to get sick sooner or later.
It's so true. I mean, through beeya, we have a lot of women who email us and they're like, listen, I've been doing all the things. I'm eating well. I'm changing my lifestyle. For some reason, my period is gone. And I'll just we'll ask questions. I know Kaya will take some calls with them as well.
Oh, really? That's so cool of you guys.
Just to connect. Yeah. We try to help and, in any way we can. But a lot of that piece, there will be a stressful event in their life. Something will happen and your period will shut off. So just going back to your point of how much your mental health and stress can truly impact the biology and your hormones is such a key piece, even if you're doing all the right things from a lifestyle perspective. Like your mind is so powerful.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And that reminds me of like when I used to be a health coach in a past life, and I would talk to so many women on the phone. And it was always start about like, I want to lose weight, or, I want to do this, or I want to cleanse my body, I want to do that. And how many of them was like the root was you need to dump your boyfriend or something like that. It was always like getting down to that emotional or mental or stressful piece. It was like, what is actually happening here? And then I said, I got to tap out because I'm not a therapist. I'm not licensed to do this. I can't tell people like what to do with their lives. But it's so true what you said. Yeah, it's like so much of it is emotional. So much of it is mental. So much of it is like the stress piece too.
Yeah, and like I think we really just all comes from self-love. If you really, really loved yourself, you wouldn't be with a guy. You wouldn't seek love from random people. And I'm literally just summarizing my entire 20s, just outsourcing my love and hoping that people would love me and give me the validation I really needed instead of really just loving myself. Amount of times I would just wait for a guy to call back, or like I would need that, And now I'm looking back, I'm like, girl, like what were you thinking? Like, look at you. Like, you're amazing. Like, why would just some random guy that you met for 5 minutes would take away your a peace of mind? And you would think like there's a part of like your ego that wants to be chosen, even though sometimes we're not 100% convinced, and we like trauma bond with people just because we can't sit with our own emotions and feeling alone. So it's just, it's a conversation for another podcast, but like, yeah, it's 100% all interconnected. So
I actually want to talk about the self-love piece because we had the holistic psychologist on, and I think she did like a therapy session on me. She's the best.
Oh my
She's
God. I'm
really
like
the
my
best.
dream guest. I literally talked to my producer today. I'm like, who do I need to speak to have Nicole? Like, she's
Oh, we'll
amazing.
connect. We'll try to help in that way. So
Okay.
yeah, you guys would have such a great conversation, and that's what she came to mind just talking about self love. And one thing that you also mentioned, which is why I thought about this, was kind of pushing and working. And I think my autopilot with life and work is things have to be hard. I always have to work. And she was mentioning, and I won't go into too much detail because again, this could be a whole other podcast, but like it boils down to self love. Like if you truly love yourself, you wouldn't push yourself to those boundaries. You wouldn't, to your point, like wait for that guy to call who's impacting how you're feeling. So I'm curious because you mentioned your 20s were filled with that. And also from a work perspective, you were someone that goes, right? How did you kind of unwind that to give yourself more self love or
I'm
do less?
trying. I mean, it's a
I know it's a
process.
work in progress. I
Yeah.
know. Well, I
I'd be like,
appreciate you
I'll
being
be
honest about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would be such an imposter. Like I love myself so much more than a year ago, and I really hope that it's going to keep on improving. I find it hard to find love for myself right now, but that's why on my phone, if you guys are listening to this, there's a photo of me when I was 5 years old, and it's my screensaver. So this is like I'm thinking of myself as this. This is inside of me, little Aggie Agnieszka, which is my full Polish name, in Poland, communist Poland, growing up, and just remember makes me want to cry, but like remembering like she just wants to play and have fun and hang out with people and feel connected and have a community. And yeah, she likes to push herself because I think from you build your like self-respect with doing difficult things, whatever that difficult is for you. It could be picking up a phone and just saying I'm sorry, that feels really difficult. Sometimes it doesn't have to be running a marathon, but that also builds your confidence, or raising a child, like asking for a raise, all of the things that are, what is your medicine, and I think a lot of times we seek those difficult things that are considered difficult, but it's everyone has a different medicine for what's me speaking to people is not difficult. So, but staying still and doing less, oh, that's the hardest medicine. I'll sit and I'm like, I even discovered that with my coach recently that a lot of times I take work just so I can work more. you know I'll be more efficient. Like there's a part of me, the 5% of me, that understands I'll do more work because that's like more feminine, that's kind of cooler, and not from a place of like I want to just rest. Rest is the default. It's not like you're earning rest. Rest is the flow. Being is your default, and then you can step away from that into doing, but doing is not my default, which has been. And I feel like I'm working towards just the unwinding that, and just stepping into more of like, yeah, there are days like the even thought that being means doing nothing. It's just like, for me, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, doing nothing is probably having a podcast conversation. Like,
Yeah. And that's also, I'm doing me. We as feminine, but like, we don't like being rushed. We don't like having a big schedule. Like, we want to see how it feels. Like, for me, up until this point, when people reach out, it's like, hey, I'd like to schedule a podcast in 3 months. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if like on a Wednesday in 3 months, I'm going to feel like talking to you. Like, that to me is like mind blowing. So it's just feeling like I don't want to come in. And people like, my producers are, we're missing these opportunities. I'm like, honestly, they're gonna come back. If someone's scheduling something 3 months in advance, that like I'm just not your person. Like for me, it's just like a few weeks in advance is helpful because like I know how I feel right now. I know that I'm so up for it, and I also understand that when people cancel, like it's also okay. When you mentioned, David and Mary, like Mary Ruth, and Kabbalah teaches a lot about just non-attachment to the outcome. And the more we attach ourselves to someone or something, the universe will take it away from us so we can see that we don't need it to be happy.
Well, I'm so excited for, motherhood for you if that's part of the journey, because that'll teach you to do nothing real quick. I mean, it'll just be so I definitely had that threshold of feeling like I wanted to work. And then after my daughter came, feeling like, oh, wow, I find the joy in nothingness so much more. And it comes in so many ways. It doesn't have to just come with motherhood. It can come in 1,000 different ways. But I want to end the conversation with maybe just leaving our audience with like, what are 3 things that you think women should be prioritizing today, and maybe 3 things that they should stop doing today if they really want to work on their hormonal health.
Oh, great question. I think that's like what's in, what's out. I think in, definitely self-love, self-experimentation, and self-awareness. I like your body, like just like being your own, like just being aware and like being present enough and mindful to notice, how does this food make me feel? How does this meal make me feel? How do these people make me feel? Am I surrounded by toxic people that like drain my inner peace? So that would be in. And then out, I would just say, I'm gonna say seed oils and processed foods. Like we all eat that, but it's just like going out is shouldn't be your default, that. I'd say, oh, it's so hard with the diet, right? Because I think it's just like unmindful eating, so swallowing food. I would just say, being present and not paying attention to the brands and what they stay behind. I think the new generation is going to really read the labels and educate themselves about different names for different poisons that they're using.
Aggie, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to share all your information about your book so people can follow you, learn about you, get your book. But this was such an honor. I feel like we were just friends having a cup of coffee, chatting about things we are passionate about. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for having me.